www.caregiving. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
This is WGBB AM 1240 and W240 DF FM 95.9 Freeport, New York.
The views expressed in the following program do not necessarily represent those of the staff, management, or owners of WGBB. Live from Merrick, New York, this is Sportstalk 1240.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second hour of Sports Talk 1240, right here on WGBB 1240 AM on Long Island. Thank you for spending your Sunday night here with me as Thanksgiving weekend is wrapping up, right here on December 1st, 2019. So thanks again for sticking around. We've got a lot to get to tonight, as it's been a very depressing day in New York football. It's been a very fun run for the hockey teams here lately, as the Islanders have just been killing it. Barry Trotz and his team, their 17-game point streak stopped, and they got into a little bit of a rut. 3 games going 0-2-1 on the West Coast, but they came back to New York on Saturday night, got it straightened out for a 2-0 victory over Columbus. And, the Rangers on the same day shut out the Devils 4-0, so both teams playing well. And, we'll be getting to a little bit of baseball hot stove a little bit later, as the Mets and the Yankees are both right in the mix with a bunch of other teams who really haven't done much so far, kind of dipping their toe in the water, seeing what free agency looks like, see what the trade market has to offer. But before we get to all that, thank you for tuning in on Sports Talk 1240 here. If you want to check us out on Twitter at Sports Talk 1240. Go to Facebook and give us a like, and check us out on sportstalk1240.com to see all of our old shows, all the hosts, and anything else that you'd like to know. But thanks for tuning in tonight. It's the first time back here in a couple of weeks. The last time I was sitting in this seat, the Mets didn't even have a manager yet, and the Jets were still winless. Not much is, the Mets hired Carlos Beltran in the meantime. I'll get into that a little bit later. I think it's a pretty good hire. Beltran's a good baseball guy. Not that, he really has a lot of experience managing. Most of the guys that they were interviewing didn't. Joe Girardi's a guy that I really wanted, and I thought that they were going to go after him, a lot harder than they did, but he ended up in Philadelphia, and, what else are you going to do? The Mets got a good guy. They got a future Hall of Famer in Carlos Beltran, most likely. He's a borderline guy, but based on the guys that have been getting in the last couple of years, I think Carlos, as a switch hitter with the home runs and having close to 3,000 hits and his postseason numbers, I think Beltran goes over the top, so he should be a Hall of Famer at some point. With the Astros cheating scandal aside, I don't think he's going to face any discipline out of that. Maybe Cora up in Boston will. But, like I said, we'll get to all that later. And unfortunately, let's start off with the New York football, as it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. The Giants today lost 31-13. There's not much to say about this game. That's why I'll start off with it, because I really want to lean into the Jets for a couple of minutes, because boy, did they really screw things up today. They finally had been getting some good press. They finally had gotten themselves seemingly back on track, but a slew of penalties and bad football and that defense that was bending and breaking today constantly. They made the Cincinnati Bengals look like Boomer Esiason was their quarterback, and they were heading to the Super Bowl this year. So, it's a very tough day for a Jet fan to swallow that, as the Jets lose again to another winless team late in this season. But like I said, let's start off with the Giants, who took one on the chin today. A tough loss, 31-13 against the Packers. Aaron Judge. Aaron Rodgers looked in prime form. He was looking like the Hall of Fame quarterback that you thought he would. He has been inconsistent this year, although his team has been winning, so I don't think Packers fans mind too much. as their future Hall of Fame quarterback, has guided them to a very good start this season. They're pretty much a slam dunk to head into the playoffs and probably win their division too. But the Giants today, 31-13, fall to 2-10, 8 straight losses. 8 straight losses. That's tough to believe after they benched Eli after those first 2 games, falling to 0-2, and everybody said, you know what? Let's give this kid Jones a shot. Jones really took the world by storm those next 2 games, coming up with a huge win against Tampa Bay, and getting the win against the Redskins as well. But once their record even to 2-2, it's been nothing but losing and pain and bad offensive line play, bad defensive line play, just bad everything, bad coaching, bad time management. It's just terrible. Missed tackles galore. It just seems like a never-ending slap in the face right now if you're a Giants fan. It's not much better if you're a Jet fan, but we'll get to that in a minute. But the Giants though, Daniel Jones, 20 of 37 today, threw a touchdown, didn't turn the ball over, so you gotta be happy about that. If you want to take another, small victory away from this game, Saquon Barkley finally looked like himself. 19 carries, 83 yards, looked a little healthier than he had the last couple of weeks, and even with as bad as the offensive line play was today, he was still able to have a very good game with yards from scrimmage and everything else. So he had it's the offensive line and the defensive line both looked awful. The Giants really have. When you look at it, man, the only guy that they really have to build around on that offensive line is probably Will Hernandez. Nate Soldier, man, that guy just came here with expectations that he was going to lock down the left side of that offensive line, being that rock, that left tackle that you could just say, you know what, he's going to protect my quarterback's blind side. He's going to make sure that this quarterback doesn't get hit a lot, and that just really hasn't been he hasn't been opening running lanes, and he hasn't been protecting the quarterback. So that's a very disappointing signing right now, and you can't blame the Giants for making that signing. It just seems that a lot of these NFL players, their best years are behind them once they hit 30. And if you're going to pay a guy for what he did in his 20s while he's in his 30s, then usually that's not a winning proposition. And unfortunately for the Giants right now, that contract is coming back to bite them. I don't even know if they can cut him next year because if they do, there's going to be a lot of dead money on there. So they're probably just going to have to at least bite the bullet for another year or maybe even 2 just to not kill their cap. Because you got to remember, too, they've got a lot of dead cap space from the Odell Beckham trade. Because in, typical Gettleman fashion, he signs Odell Beckham Jr. to this huge contract, which, by the way, he's really done nothing in Cleveland this year, as Cleveland has been a bad team pretty much all year, and Odell Beckham is, barely at 50 receptions when he was hoping for 100. So, take that for what it is. But when we get back to the Giants, there's going to be a lot of dead cap space. So you're going to have to manage yourself. Next season, they're going to have a decent amount of cap space, but it's really going to be eaten up by a lot of players that either aren't here anymore or just aren't contributing on the way that the Giants need them to. And, Soldier is first and foremost on that list. So, but to look forward to the Giants right now, next week, they're going to be playing in Philadelphia, Monday night. I would circle that game and I could see the Giants getting up for that one. But, Philadelphia is going to be mad because if you didn't see, Philadelphia choked one out and lost a tough game to Miami today. Miami, who, as bad as that Jet loss felt when they took one on the chin against the Finns just a couple of weeks ago, it I mean, it doesn't make you feel any better about losing to an 0-7 team. But the thing is that Miami showed they have a pulse. Miami showed they went out and beat the Colts after that, after they beat the Jets, and now beating a very good team, the Eagles, is just goes to show that maybe the Dolphins, even though they've completely stripped their team of a lot of their well-known talent, still have enough talent on that team to contribute. And plus, a lot of these guys have pride, which you can't discount these guys' pride on the field. These guys are NFL professional athletes that take their job seriously, and in a league where guys average 3 or 4 years in that league, you don't want to give your spot up. If you're there, if you're in the big time, you're gonna play hard. So, as much as it might hurt, like the Jets lost today to an 0-11 team, those guys are fighting for their jobs too. Andy Dalton doesn't know where he's going to be next year. A lot of people are thinking that Cincinnati's going to draft the LSU quarterback because he's from the Cincinnati area, which would make sense. The guy's killing it this year too if it comes out, so it would be the perfect timing. But the other guys on the team, Andy Dalton is going to want his spot, depending if he's there next year. Maybe they keep him around to mentor this quarterback, but you never know. He could be on a different team next year, starting somewhere else. So these guys have something to play for always, and the Giants. If you looked at to just get back to the Giants for a minute, if you looked at the stadium today, the Giants fans know what they're getting. It was half empty. It was just an ugly, ugly day, weather-wise, football-wise. The Packers, obviously, bad weather is not going to scare a team from Lambeau Field. Playing over there in Wisconsin with always high winds, low temperature, and a threat of snow. So you can't discount the fact that the Packers were definitely prepared to play in there, and they were able to just do what they wanted to do against that Giant defense, which has been the case for a lot of teams the last few weeks. As aside from the Bears, everybody seems to be dropping 30 on this team. So. A lot of people are feeling like this is going to be the end of the Gettleman era, the end of Pat Shurmur being the Giants coach, and I don't necessarily know if that's the case because, maybe the former Giants owners, Mara's dad and everything, Wellington, I could see him making a change because they had very, very high standards, and I'm not saying the Giants don't have high standards now. But, Mara's kid, he wants to keep a little continuity here. And not that I blame him, but just like on the other side of town, when a guy's not the right coach or a guy's not the right general manager, no matter what it looks on the outside, you got to get rid of them. Just like the Jets had Idzik a couple of years ago, everybody knew that he was terrible and had to go. Now, the Jets replaced him with a guy in Mike McCagan who wasn't much better, but, John Idzik stinks. And, there you go. It's a headline from 5 years ago. But anyway, just to get back to the Giants and finish up on there real quick, don't be surprised if the Giants don't completely have an overhaul and get rid of their GM and get rid of their coach. Because, that's, the Giants want to keep a little continuity in there. And whether it's right or wrong, they don't want to be giving Daniel Jones and Saquon mixed messages their first couple of years in the league. You want to keep them on the same page, see if maybe you can make progression, because Shurmur really did the biggest CYA job of all time at the beginning of the year when they started 0-2 and he just pulled the plug right away. And he saw the writing on the wall that this was not a good team. And if you listen to, a couple of guys on The Fan, if you listen to a bunch of Giant fans, people were kind of half-heartedly expecting this Giant team to contend this year. I heard people predicting 10-6 or 11-5. I kind of thought that was insane. I didn't think the Giants were a playoff team, but some people did. And when you come into the season with those expectations, the only way that you can take the pressure off yourself and get yourself off the hot seat is put the rookie quarterback in. Because now the rest of the season you could just say, we got a rookie quarterback in. What do you expect? He's growing. I'm doing everything I can, but the wins are secondary to this quarterback's growth. Whether it's true or not, it's still a CYA because this is a situation where, people are not happy. 8 straight losses right now. This is as bad a run as the Giants have had since the 70s. And actually, with the Jets, too. The Jets, they're not going to make the playoffs this year, obviously. Now people kind of had delusions before today's game that maybe if they ran the table, they'd have a shot of sneaking in at 9-7. Well, that's out the window now, especially with the Bills continuing their rampage right now. The Bills at 9-3. Who would have thought that? Great game by Allen, too. They really looked like world beaters on Thanksgiving. I don't know if you caught that game, but if you did, you knew that the Bills are legit right now. Going into Dallas, beating them on Thanksgiving in an impressive fashion like they did. So, just to, the thing about the Giants is that things have not worked out this year. Daniel Jones is their guy, and there's nothing else to say about it. So, I just want to do the Jets real quick now, as I ended up spending more time bouncing all over the place than I thought. But, as we look at the Jets, what can you say? What can you say? They erased any goodwill that they had over the last 3 weeks with one of the ugliest losses that you'll ever see. They lost to the 0-11, now 1-11 Bengals. Yes, just like with Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker, the Jets are the 1 in the 1-11, just to show you how bad they are. The Bengals beat them 22-6 in Cincinnati. The Jets are the first team in NFL history. Now, that's not something that you want to hear after a loss. They're the first team in NFL history to lose to 2 teams that were 0-7 or worse in the same season. They lost to Miami, who was 0-7, and now they lost to the Bengals, who were 0-11. If you're old enough, you might remember that this is the first time the Jets have lost to a team that's worse than 0-10 since they lost to the 0-14 Saints at Shea Stadium in December of 1980. So it's been a while since the Jets kind of got an embarrassment like this late in the season. And be that as it may, it was a just as ugly. I'm sure it felt just as ugly today as it did in 1980. Although I would have preferred seeing the game at Shea Stadium, to be quite honest. The Jets only ran the ball 9 out of their first 37 plays, the first half. And even though Le'Veon Bell was averaging 4.5 yards a carry, and I know they went down early, 17-3, and you thought that they kind of had to pass the ball a lot, but you really didn't have to panic. And I felt like Gase panicked early and just started dropping Darnold back and back and back. The guy almost passed 50 times today. And you can't do that with Sam Darnold at this point in his career. The guy just had 3 straight good games. You can't act like he's coming off 3 straight MVPs. Especially when Le'Veon Bell is moving the ball better than he has pretty much all season. He even had a 23-yard run that was canceled by penalties, and that's a theme for this game today, is the penalties. Because the penalties were all over the place, all game, mostly coming from the offensive line, and they ended up with 10 penalties for 106 yards, and that is as disgusting as it is unacceptable. You can't do that, and that's coaching. And some of these penalties were just freaking ridiculous. And I know, look, while I was watching the game too, you could tell a lot of these weren't great calls. I mean, but when you get 10 penalties for 106 yards, you can't blame it all on the refs. I'm sorry. And, it definitely wasn't all the refs either, because the Jets kept making mistakes, kept making penalties, cost themselves a safety for a holding call in the end zone, which was definitely a holding. They really have to just overhaul this entire offensive line. I don't think there's one redeeming person on there. I know Jonathan Harrison's played better than Khalil did at center. I don't know if you can rely on him to be a starter next year. The Jets need to probably bring in 5 new guys next season, even though I will say Kelvin Beachum is a decent guy. And when you look at the Jets' record coming into today, they were 4-1 when Beachum and Darnold were on the field at the same time this season. The team was 4-1 and averaged 28 points a game. Well, that average took a little bit of a hit today because they only put up 6 points. as Carlos Dunlap just freaking blitzed their offensive line all day, took Sam Darnold down 3 times. Darnold was sacked 4 times, hurried a bunch more, and 3 of those 4 times was by Dunlap. That guy is a heck of a player. Just he did a great job today. And one thing that the Jets have really been getting praised with the last few weeks is the defense by Greg Williams, who took over this defense, which was terrible last year, and he's made it a top 10 defense. And I believe in the rush, they're number 1. They're one of the top defenses statistically in the league, and you give a lot of that credit to Greg Williams himself, and obviously a lot of these players. You've had guys like Blayson Austin who just got picked apart today. It seemed like in this game a lot of these injuries that they've been patching up the last few weeks really got exposed. Obviously they don't have either of the middle linebackers. Mosley and Avery Williamson are out. Trumaine Johnson is hurt. You've got Neville Hewitt playing big minutes. I know Neville Hewitt's a decent player, but you had him deep in coverage today, covering these tight ends and wide receivers. He was getting burned every time he turned around. And the guys had a good run, too. I like Neville Hewitt. But, it just was wrong coverages at the wrong time. Just bad defense today. And the Jet defense just looked like a shell of itself. And it was very shocking after last week. They had one of their best performances in years with the skeleton crew that they have out there. So, it was disappointing, but Andy Dalton was due for a good game. And, that's why it's very rare to see a team go 0-16, because these guys are professionals, and sometimes on the right week against the right opponent, it just clicks. And there's nothing you can say about that. Another thing I noticed was that Adams and Quinnen Williams were just pretty invisible today. You really didn't see. I saw Adams blitz a couple of times. I saw him break up a play or two. But other than that, it wasn't like the game against the Giants where you noticed Jamal Adams on every single play. Now, if you're going to be one of the top safeties in the league, and I'm not knocking Jamal, because Jamal Adams is probably the best player on this team, and is a great player, no doubt about it, and deserves to get paid. The Jets should pay him next year. But if you're going to be one of the top safeties in the league, like a Troy Polamalu type, which is who I equate him to, he's in that league, or he can be in that league, in my opinion. But you've got to be the guy that you were against the Giants every single week. Maybe not have the amount of turnovers, and you're not going to have 3 sacks every game if you're a safety, but you've got to be in the mix. And I only noticed Jamal on a couple of plays today, and that's not like him. So he really needs to show up next week and have a good game. And Quinnen Williams, I'm just very disappointed in. It seems like it would have been a much better pick if the Jets picked, Josh Allen, like everybody was talking about. The other Josh Allen, not the quarterback, the D end. So this guy's having a great year so far. So, it stinks. You hope that Quinnen Williams, in his defense, has been graded high on like Pro Football Focus and other websites where you get guys, kind of like the Leonard Williams thing, where everybody said, okay, his stats doesn't really show, but the guy is contributing. And I would say he is, considering how well the Jets have played against the run, and he's the nose tackle, so he's got a lot to do with that. But you'd like to see it translate more into the stats category, but hopefully he's still just young, and maybe the Jets can mold him into a guy that is consistently pressuring the quarterback and the offense behind the line of scrimmage. But don't worry, Jet fans, because the brilliant owners of the teams said, don't worry, no matter what happens the rest of the season, Adam Gase is our man next year. So even if they go out and lose again to Miami next week, if they lose to Baltimore, and they lose to the 3 remaining teams after that, don't worry. 4-12, Adam Gase will still be here next year. I feel like we'll be looking for a new coach a year from now, after December of 2020. So, I want to give Gase credit, but and also I just did not like that after this game, after this disgusting loss again, that he really didn't show any emotion or anything along those lines at all. So just a very disappointing day from a Jets point of view. But I'm going to wrap up here as we wrap up the first half of this hour. Thanks for sticking around here with me on Sports Talk 1240. We still got a lot to get to in the second half of the show. Thanks for sticking around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Sports Talk 1240 on Long Island's AM 1240. WGBB. Foot Care, official podiatrists of the New York Lizards, have been delivering state-of-the-art foot care with good old-fashioned care to Long Island residents for over 40 years. Specialists in sports medicine and foot injuries, Country Foot Care can be reached at 516-741-FEET or online at countryfootcare.com. Want to advertise your business on Sports Talk 1240? Place an ad on sportstalk1240.com and run a radio commercial during the show every Sunday night here on AM 1240 WGBB. Our rates are very affordable. We'll even produce the radio commercial for you. Just head over to sportstalk1240.com and fill out the Contact Us form and let us start promoting your business today.
Unflippable, unflappable, unleakable. The Gustbuster is the only umbrella that won't flip inside out, rip, tear, or leak. Capable of withstanding winds over 55 miles per hour. All of our umbrellas are constructed of the finest quality materials and backed by a limited lifetime guarantee. What are you waiting for? Visit GustBuster.com and get your Gustbuster today.
Stay connected to Sports Talk 1240 by following us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Sports Talk 1240.
You're listening to Sports Talk 1240, broadcasting every Sunday night beginning at 8 p.m. right here on Long Island's AM 1240 WGBB, the station that serves your community. And now, back to the show.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for sticking around here on Sports Talk 1240. And this is This Day in Sports History. This day in sports history, on December 1st, 1928, the National League president, John Haler, becomes the first to propose the designated hitter. Ironically, it's voted in favor by the National League, but voted down by the American League, delaying the DH rule coming into Major League Baseball until 1973. And on this date in 1954, the Yankees and the Orioles complete the largest trade in Major League Baseball history, a trade that brought the Yankees Don Larson, Gene Woodling, and Bob Turley, all players who would contribute to future championships for the Yankees. And on this date in 1964, the Houston Colt 45s changed their name to the Houston Astros to honor the space program, which was based out of Houston, Texas. And finally, on this date, December 1st, 1996, Brian Leach scores and an assistant. Brian Leach scores an assist for his 600th NHL point, and Wayne Gretzky becomes the first player in NHL history to reach the 3,000-point plateau, including the playoffs, with a 6-2 win for the Rangers over the Canadiens. And that is this day in sports history. All right, well, thank you for sticking around here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Rob Cramer. Like I said earlier, if you want to check us out online, you can check us out on sportstalk1240.com. And also, if you want to see a live feed of the show, you can go to my YouTube page, YouTube/Coffee with Cramer, and you can check us out here and see everything else that's going on in the studio. And other than that, thanks for joining me here tonight as Thanksgiving weekend wraps up here, and we start December on the march to Christmas. Who can believe that Christmas is only 25 days away, and before you know it, it'll be 2020. Crazy that this year is almost over. If you'd like to give me a call here and just let me know what's on your mind, you can give me a call at 516-623-1240. That's 516-623-1240. Give me a call. What's on your mind? See if talk a little hockey, talk a little basketball, a little baseball, anything you want. And but what I'm going to do here now is we're going to be talking about a little hockey, as we got two of the hottest teams in the league. Actually, the Rangers 10-4-2 since late October. The Islanders, like a house of fire, just blazing a trail to the NHL. The Islanders right now, we'll stick with them. Get to the Rangers in a minute. Islanders are 17-5-2, 36 points so far. One of their best starts in team history. Especially, if you're looking outside of any of those Cup years where they just had Hall of Famers galore. And, every time you turned around, this team was winning another Cup 4 straight years. They were in the Cup finals for 5 straight years. If it wasn't for the Rangers beating them in '79, it could have been 6. So, this is one of the top Islander starts that they've had in decades. And the crazy thing is that it doesn't even have them in first place. They're in second place behind the Washington Capitals. Um, they've the Capitals have 43 points. They're up to a 19-4 start, so they're in a different league right now. The Islanders are still playing great, but one thing you have to remember is that the Islanders do have 4 games at hand against the Washington Caps, so that's something to keep in mind. There's an 8-point difference between the two, so the Islanders would have to go 4-0 in those 4 games to match the point total for the first place Caps, as they just continue to play great hockey. The Islanders had this incredible point streak too. It ended at 17 straight games. They lost in OT at San Jose last Saturday night. That was the 17th game because it was in overtime, so they did get a point out of that game. But that West Coast swing was not the best for the Islanders, as they'd go out get outscored 7-1 in the next 2 games, losing 3-0 on Monday night to the Anaheim Ducks and losing 4-1 to the LA Kings. Not a very good team, the LA Kings, on Wednesday night, the night before Thanksgiving as well. The Islanders did come back, like I said earlier, with a very nice 2-0 win, back here in New York on Saturday night against a always tough Columbus Blue Jacket team. You can never take that team lightly. You can really never take a John Tortorella team lightly because, if you recall, just like the Rangers had back in the day, the black and the blue shirts, when they might not have had the best talent in the league, but they were a team that was going to block shots and just beat the heck out of you in the corners and win all of those tough battles. So it was a tough battle on Saturday night, but the Islanders got the job done. A 2-0 victory. But that loss that ended their losing streak, they went from October 11th until the end of November without without losing a game in regulation, which is just incredible. When you think about the best streaks the Islanders have ever had, that's right up there. And you can't really look any further on the Islanders than obviously Anders Lee is playing great as their captain. They've got Matthew Barzal, who has really just stepped into the John Tavares biggest star in the team role. And how funny is it that much like Bryce Harper leaving the Nationals, the Islanders really picked up speed and became a much better team when John Tavares left, although I'm not going to put all that on JT. I think a lot of it has to do with the coaching. Barry Trotz has the Islanders playing a very tight defensive style of hockey and very responsible. So that's why I think, too, as much as a lot of people, including myself, raised their eyebrow when the Islanders let their goalie from last year walk because he, supposedly the Islanders gave him 5 minutes to make up his mind if he wanted to accept their contract offer or not. I think that was kind of a situation where the Islanders said, as long as we can find a reasonably priced goalie, we don't have to commit long-term or big money to a goalie because the system and the players they have are going to provide enough cover for even a reasonably talented goalie to go out there and have a good year with the team they have in front of them. And I think that, as questionable as it might have seemed in the interim, it's worked out pretty damn well for the Islanders, and you can't really argue that, as they've gone out to one of the best records in the league. Barry Trotz, even this is a thing too. It all starts at the top. Lou Lamoriello, I've said this over and over again. That guy, one of the best general managers in sports, not just hockey, sports. He went out there and he teamed up with the recently fired Mike Babcock in Toronto. And while they might not have had much postseason success, I think a lot of that has to do with Babcock and his players apparently not liking playing under him for whatever reason. I guess the guy wasn't too nice of a guy. A lot of these stories are coming out recently that Babcock and his coaching decisions not very good. His coach, the way he gets his players up for a game, are a little questionable. Supposedly, if you want, you can Google that and find out. He's had a lot of problems with Mitch Marner and a couple of the other guys out there, former Maple Leafs who played under him, even former guys with the Red Wings. But just to get back to the point, Lou Lamoriello went out there and turned what had been an awful, awful Toronto Maple Leafs team for at least the last decade. And I know they haven't won a cup since 1967, but at least the team would go out there and field a competitive team a lot. They'd be in the mix when they had Cujo and all these other big guys. So they were always seemingly in the mix. But the last 10 years, it's really dried up since before Lamoriello got there. But he turned that team into a contender. Then he comes over to the Islanders, and it's not a coincidence that one of the first things he did was go out and sign the defending Stanley Cup champions head coach in Barry Trotz, brought him to New York, which if you would have told me that Barry Trotz was coming to the Islanders before that, I would have laughed in your face. I would have said, why in the world would Barry Trotz waste his time coming to the Islanders, a team that barely had an owner, much less a direction? And, he went out there, and that's what a good GM can do for you. He gave the Islanders credibility. He turned the Islanders from what had been a team, one of the more talented teams in the league over the last couple of years, that just seemingly wasted all their talent. Sure, they would get up for those Ranger games. They would definitely get up for those games when they'd be blowing the Rangers out the Garden, and you really saw all the talent they had, all the young talent. But it really didn't translate into anything in the postseason. And in fact, they didn't make the postseason most of those years. Then they go out and they bring in Trotz. Lamoriello takes over. Now suddenly, bang, bang, you got 2 very good seasons in a row. You get 2 years where, the Islanders are a serious threat. You really can't say anything else. They play good defense. They play. They have a good penalty kill. They can score in the power play every once in a while. They've got young talent. They got speed. You got a goaltender you can depend on. You've got a backup goaltender you can depend on, whether it's Varlamov or Thomas Greiss, who's been one of the best in the league so far this season statistically. The Islanders have a lot to be proud of. And what I did want to get back to is Barry Trotz, even after a 17-game point streak where his team had come back. I mean, you saw the Islanders, they'd be down 4-2. Then, bang, bang, the last 5 minutes of regulation against Pittsburgh, whoever they were playing that night. It'd be 4-4. They'd be going overtime. They'd win the game in overtime. They'd be down 3-0 after 2. Bang, 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 tie the game, 3-3. The Islanders were just like a fireworks show. Every time he turned around, they would be having a great game, a great comeback. Oh, how'd the Islanders come back tonight? Oh, man. The Islanders were just on one of those rolls where everything was breaking right. But as soon as it stopped, Barry Trotz did not hesitate to rip his team after they got shut out 3-0. And then after they lost 4-1 to the Kings. He did not want that to be accepted. And that's a good head coach. That's a head coach that understands that as much success as you've had and as much as you're not going to win every game, that the effort has to be there. And whether you're on the road and it's been a long road trip and no matter the set of the circumstances, you still have to go out there and get the job done and play hard and win the battles in the corners. And he didn't see his team do that, and he called them out. And I think that you can really give Barry Trotz a lot of credit for how this team recomposed itself, came back home, and got back on the right track on Saturday night. If you look ahead for the Islanders tomorrow, on Monday and Tuesday, they're going to be playing a back-to-back. They're going to be playing in Detroit tomorrow night. They're going to be playing in Montreal the following night. And speaking of Montreal, that's where the Rangers' recent good run really kicked into second gear, in my opinion. They came back from 4-0. We'll get back to that in a couple of minutes as we'll wrap up with the Islanders here. The good thing for the Islanders, too, is that after a recent stretch of tough games and being on the road for a little while, and now the next 2 games are going to be on the road as well, but it seems to be against who you call like second division teams, kind of. Montreal is kind of in the middle where they've got a lot of talent. You still have Carey Price, who, no matter how you feel about Carey Price, he's probably a future Hall of Famer, or at least close to it. The guy won an MVP, can't forget that. Guy's one of the most successful goalies over the last couple of years, especially maybe the last decade. Him and Lundqvist are right up there, both having no cup too. But you have to also throw Jonathan Quick into that mix. So you get those guys, and when you look at this, what the Islanders do have coming up, you have the chance to get 4 points here, get yourself back on track, and really erase those feelings from a tough West Coast trip. With Washington off to the fast start they've been, the Islanders need all the points they can get, and especially if they have their sights set on a division title. They haven't won a division title in quite some time. They haven't been to an Eastern Conference Final since 1993, and after they won a playoff series against the Panthers a couple of years ago, they won a playoff series last year to put them into the second round. Just like the Islanders remind me kind of where the Rangers were coming out of the lockout of 05-06, where they made the playoffs a couple of times. The first year they got knocked out right away. Then they won a playoff series. They won another playoff series. And before you know it, a couple of years later, that's when they started to get into the conference finals and finally made it to the Stanley Cup final. So the Islanders kind of remind me where they're right on the precipice, and they had to take that step forward this year, and they really have to win 2 playoff series at least, get to the Eastern Conference Finals, and have a chance to play for the biggest prize in hockey. And the Islanders owe that to their fans, who stuck by them, their passionate fan base, and they really deserve that. So we'll see how that plays out. They've had a great start, and they got to keep it up. That's the main thing. And like we said, the Islanders are playing in Montreal on Tuesday night, and like I said earlier, that's where things really started to turn around for the Rangers. They've been on a good run since late October, since October 29th. The New York Rangers are 10-4-2. A very good run, one of their best runs over the last couple of seasons since this rebuild began. They're allowing less goals a game. They're playing better defense. They still got to stay out of that box, man. They're playing shorthanded a lot. They did it on Saturday. As much as it was a fun game, they won 4-0 against New Jersey. To rebound after a real tough loss the day after Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving Showdown on NBC, which is a lot of fun to watch. But the Rangers had a 2-0 lead in that game, blew it, ended up losing 3-2 in overtime. So it was nice to get a point, and the Bruins are one of the better teams in the league. But come on, you gotta, you really gotta lock down that win when you got a 2-0 lead, and you got a team right where you want them. But the Bruins smelt blood in the water. They scored at the end of the second, and before you knew it, the Rangers were on the run pretty much the whole third period. And so if you want to keep it going, the Rangers have just been playing very good lately. And a good November doesn't necessarily mean they're going to make the playoffs. They've got to keep it going. You can't, fall back into any of these bad habits. But when you've got a guy like Artemi Panarin, who, if you've been watching this team at all, if you know hockey, you know Artemi Panarin is one of the best players in the league, and he's getting paid like it. So the Rangers are very happy with how their top man is playing so far. In the month of November, he had 23 points, 7 goals, and 16 assists. In November, he's the first Ranger since Jaromir Jagr in March of 2006 to record at least 20 points in a calendar month. And what's crazy to me is that right now when you look at Panarin, he's on pace for 54 goals and 68 assists. He's on pace for a hell of a season. And, he's probably not going to keep that pace up. The guy's, tops out around 80 to 90 points a year, which would be fine, and I'd be very happy with that. But it's crazy to me, too, when you look back, as we referenced that Jagr 05-06 season where he had 54 goals, 69 assists for 123 points. If you look at it, Panarin, as great as he's been, still isn't even on pace to break that mark or even tie it. He's on pace to have just under however many points Jagr had at 123. So, very funny to see just how good Jagr was. And if you didn't appreciate that season or you didn't get the chance to see it, man, you missed one of the best offensive seasons a New York Rangers ever had. And that includes Rod Gilbert. That includes any of the greats in the past. Jean Rattel, Mark Messier. The Rangers even had, we talked, Wayne Gretzky earlier this year. And even though Gretzky was late in his career, he never had a great season in a Ranger uniform like Jaromir Jagr did in that 05-06 season. If you want to put Gretzky back to those Edmonton Oilers days, he scored about twice as many points as he did that season, and I'm not exaggerating that. He had over 200 points in multiple seasons with the Edmonton Oilers in the early 80s. That just shows how good Gretzky is. And you rarely even see anybody get 100 points in a season these days, outside of maybe a Connor McDavid, who is one of the better players in hockey, without a doubt, obviously. And just to keep running down these Rangers list, as Adam Fox now, in 2 of the last 3 games, has scored the game-winning goal. He's the first Rangers rookie defenseman to do that since Ron Greschner did it in 1975. So in January of 75. So it was the 74-75 season. That's just goes to show how rare that is. And this guy Fox has a bit of a touch to score. He's got 5 goals now this year. If you look, Tony DeAngelo is another guy who's a goal scorer. He's got 7 goals this year. He's got close to 20 points already. He's been such a great player, and he's really turning into, it seems, as much as I had high hopes for Elias Anderson, he's down in Hartford right now, and looking like he's not really going to contribute too much, at least this season. It could be ever, but you hope it's just this season. Maybe he's got to straighten his head out. But it looks like a couple of these guys the Rangers have acquired are going to be, cornerstone guys like Libor Hajek, one of the guys they got in the Ryan McDonough trade. He doesn't have the offensive prowess of a Fox or or Tony DeAngelo, but he's the defensive stalwart that you put back there. He's played very well so far. Jacob Trouba, who they've been pairing with Tony DeAngelo a lot, that combination has been dynamite lately. You can't compliment them enough, especially when they're coming off their first, their first shutout of the season, as they try to get one of the worst goals against in the league down. I know it's kind of hurt by the fact that they allowed 9 goals in an embarrassing fashion against the Tampa Bay Lightning a couple of weeks ago, but that doesn't change the fact that they've got to play better defense and they've got to stay out of the box. I was going to mention before I got into it with the Devil game where they still won 4-0. They were shorthanded 8 times. They had 15 minutes of penalties to kill off in that game. It's the first time they've had to kill off more than 15 minutes of penalties in a game and won that game since 2007. So it just goes to show you, when you have that many penalties, you don't win that often. So it's good to see that they were able to come up. And actually, they thrived. Not only did they have the Devils go 0 for 8 on the power play in that game, their their penalty kill scored 2 shorthanded goals. So you really have to give them that. Now with the 2 shorthanded goals, they're tied with the Vegas Golden Knights, who they play tomorrow at Madison Square Garden for the league lead in shorthanded goals. Also Zibanejad, who had missed 13 previous games, it's good to finally get him back in the lineup. They really never said what it was. They said it was an upper body injury. A lot of people suspect it was a concussion or some kind of neck problem. So it's good to see Zibanejad back out there. He had 2 points on the shorthanded assists. The first Ranger to have multiple shorthanded points in a game in over 6 years since Dominic Moore. So that just goes to show it's a very rare thing to have that much success on the power play, on the penalty kill. I'm sorry about that. And, like I said, the Rangers' young defense has played much better. They still give up a lot of shots, and they got to stay out of the box, but they're getting better. They're getting more responsible, and, they're not in a position where they can play the style of hockey the Islanders play, because the Islanders have vets who've been there before and know what the Rangers have a bunch of 23 and under, mostly 21-year-old kids on the team. So there's a big learning curve there, and that's what this season's all about, seeing what these guys got. And just to touch on it one more time, they're hoping that big comeback against Montreal is the start of something big for this team. The way they're playing now, they should be on the peripheral of the playoff hunt, and that's all you can ask from this team. Nobody thought that they were going to go on a deep playoff run. Most people didn't think they were going to contend, but they've put themselves in a good position. David Quinn has done a good job of coaching, and that's all you can ask right now. Let's just get some growth, and pat Lindy rough on the back for a good special teams performance the last couple of games. And before we get finished up here, ladies and gentlemen, as we round the final bend here on Sportstalk 1240, I just want to touch on the Knicks real quick, because they got under my skin today as they blew another one to Boston today, 113-104. They lost a game that they led by 16 against the Sixers on Friday. They lost another big one today. They dropped to 4-16. Somehow they're on pace. They're 2 games worse than the pace they were last year when they went 17-65. They started 6-14 last year, so 2 games worse. They play no defense. They can't hit free throws. They spent millions of dollars in free agency. They spent over $180 million in free agency. I know a lot of that money is on a 1-year deal where, you really, most of that money is not going to be guaranteed beyond this season. But when you look at these guys, you got Julius Randle has played okay, 16 points a game, 9 rebounds. He's played pretty decently, although in the big spot, he makes me very nervous. Bobby Portis, same thing. The guy is making over $15 million this season, 8 points a game, 6 rebounds. Is that worth it? Taj Gibson, 5 points. He's making $10 million a year. Marcus Morris has been pretty good. He's been the best player on the team, but he's also taken minutes away from Kevin Knox. And he's not going to be on here beyond this season. So what I just wanted to point out, as I'm running low on time here, is that the Knicks spent all this money. And Reggie Bullock, even 2 years, $21 million. The guy hasn't even played this year. And Elfrid Payton, 2 years, $16 million, hasn't played since 10/28. So the Knicks have gotten no bang for their buck, but still they're going to fire David Fizdale because the GM and the team president didn't do a good job this offseason. They could have taken on contracts, and got back picks or something along those lines, get back undesirable contracts, and worked it out some other way. But we'll get to that point. The Knicks and the Nets are going to be a good team. I haven't really had a chance to touch on the Nets, but we'll get to that the next time I'm on. As I just wanted to touch on the Knicks a little bit. Basically, what I wanted to say is they spent all this money, and all the money has gone nowhere. So, all right, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for sticking with me here on Sunday night, all the way down to 10 o'clock here, as we make the final round on Sports Talk 1240. I want to thank Brian behind the glass here for sticking around with me here late. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. You can check me out on Twitter at Cramer New York or at Coffee W Cramer. Check me out there. See everything I got to offer. Check us out on Facebook and everything else. And I'll see you next time around the bend. Have a great weekend.
Views expressed in the previous program do not necessarily represent those of the staff, management, or owners of WGBB.
This is the